If you're watching this video, chances are that you live subordinate to a system of government. And, in all likelihood, this system of government operates and functions through a system of economics dependent upon a medium of exchange, known as money. This may appear as an obvious fact of life, one that is familiar and easily recognizable. However, this familiarity should not automatically constitute consent. Human beings, by their very nature, certainly appear to gravitate towards spirituality, in that they seek to concern themselves with something more divine than the corporeal flesh of the earthly vessels they inhabit. And, with this basic understanding regarding the nature of the human being, those who seek power and control over our species now have a path to craft a self-sustaining control grid. One which manipulates the spiritual aspects of humanity into serving and ultimately worshiping the state and its economic system created through money. This is achieved through the laws and regulations set forth by the state, as well as the de facto standard of earning money, which requires the citizen of the state to allocate the universal currency of time to a profession so that she may receive a piece of paper or a number in her bank account, which physically symbolizes the time she has spent. In most cases, a substantial portion of the money earned from spending time is then given to the state itself in the form of tax. These paradigms lock broader society into a system of control where few will ever give these ideas any thought. The implicit standard after being born into society is consent. However, the act of consent is simply not enough to maintain this type of order. Society is also subconsciously asked by those who seek control to worship these entities we refer to as money and the state, as the act of worship seeks to eternalize. Though the exact origin of money is an enigma in the mainstream record of history, one of the earliest examples of coin money can be found in the ancient Greek city of Ephesus at the great temple of Artemis, where coins were proffered as a form of worship to the mother goddess Artemis, who was later known to the Romans as Diana. From the earliest known induction of coinage in Ephesus at the Temple of Artemis, we can see how money is closely related to worship and spirituality. In the regions of Sumer, Babylonia, and Phoenicia, the practice of sacred prostitution was introduced. Sacred prostitution was considered a fertility rite in which citizens of these particular regions could engage in sexual intercourse performed in the context of religious worship. In the ancient Greek temple of Aphaca, men would pay coins in dedication to Aphrodite before engaging in sex with a temple prostitute, who would act as Aphrodite's earthly counterpart. Money, from its onset, has been both given and received as a spiritual form of worship. This points towards money having a sacred place within our species' history. In the ancient Roman Empire, The goddess Juno Moneta was viewed as the protector of the state and monetary stability. Money in ancient Rome was coined in her temple. In several modern languages, including Russian and Italian, moneta is the word for coin. In English, moneta is the root of the words monetary, money, and mint. Even in modern times, many people practice religions whose primary scriptures reference money quite often. The Bible is said to reference money more than 800 times throughout the book. There indeed appears to be an inextricable link between money, spirituality, and worship. The Romans viewed the goddess Juno Moneta as a stewardess for not only money, but another idol of worship, the state itself. Yale and London School of Economics anthropologist David Graeber dedicated his life's work to understanding our species' relationship with money and the state. Graeber's arguments center around money arising as a byproduct of the state. Graeber suggests that the creation of money within the state comes about due to the state searching for a means of production for paying soldiers. Soldiers are the citizens of the state who enforce the will of the state upon others. In a strange way, this omnipresent and amorphous configuration we call the state is able to create through money an apparatus for physically enforcing and managing society.
Here's the interesting thing. Coins are invented nearly simultaneously. It happens first in Lydia in the Eastern Mediterranean, but shortly thereafter, at least in broad historical terms, it happens in the Ganges Plain in northern India and in the plains of northern China, Ganges Valley, I'm sorry. And in every case, through different physical techniques, in one case stamped, in one case cast. But the social situation seems to be the same, which is that money in the physical sense, currency, is actually invented to pay soldiers. It would be very hard to understand why governments demanded taxes in money. I mean, it might seem self-evident, but the moment you think about it, it isn't, because if gold and silver are just money, well, why not just grab the gold and silver mines? And in fact, governments would do that. I mean, ancient kings would normally grab the gold and silver mines. In theory, you have all the gold and silver you want, you got all the money. Why would you then take the stuff, stamp your picture on it, give it to people and say, okay, everybody in the kingdom has to give me one of these back again? Think about it, it's kind of odd. But it makes perfect sense if you're trying to feed an army. You know, here you have this army of 100,000 people. They're sitting in town on the border. Well, how are you going to get food to them? Under ancient conditions, unless they're next to the ocean, you know, where it's easy, relatively easy to move stuff around. It's extremely difficult to move around large amounts of grain. They're going to eat everything within walking distance in a matter of weeks. So what are you going to do? Either you have to employ, you know, another 100,000 people just bringing them stuff, or you can give them all tiny little pieces of metal with your picture on it and say, okay, everybody in the kingdom has to give me one back. Voila, you've just employed your entire population, you know, getting soldiers things they want. And that's essentially what taxation systems have done throughout world history. I mean, colonial empires did this very, very self-consciously, like in Madagascar, where I was. First thing the French did, they said, okay, we've just conquered you. That was very expensive, outfitting an army, or you're going to have to pay us back for the cost of having conquered you. We will issue paper money, and you'll have to give, you know, 10 of those back to us every year. You know, it was a way of creating a market. Somehow or another, you're going to have, you know, they actually called it the, you know, the moralizing tax to teach people the value of work. You know. So money and taxes have been used throughout the centuries as ways of creating markets. which is very interesting because we have this assumption that markets and governments, and particularly war-making governments, are opposed principles, and that political choice for the last century or so has largely revolved around which one we're going to slant to. Are we going to go more on the government side, more on the market side? Those are the two sort of logical human possibilities. Ever since people like Herbert Spencer wrote in early 19th century, we've always assumed there's an opposition between these things. Historically, in fact, no. Markets tend to be created by governments as a side effect of military operations.
The dynamic set up from Graeber's arguments inevitably leads to viewing the state and money as two heads of the same monster. The state enforces the concept of money, while money enforces the concept of the state as its physical representative in our reality. Understanding that the state is designed by nature to exert violence is a very revealing flaw in our current societal paradigm. The necessity of the state or government has been argued for thousands of years, according to the mainstream record of human history. Ancient Greek philosophers, such as Plato and Aristotle, both viewed the state as a necessity for human well-being and flourishment. As Aristotle put it in his Politics, man is by nature a political animal. In his Republic, Aristotle's teacher, Plato, suggests that the human soul is divided into three parts, which are located in different regions of the body. Plato goes on to state that these three parts of the soul also correspond to the three classes of society: the rulers, the military, and the ordinary citizens. Here, we can begin to see the origin regarding the belief that the human being is by nature political, and her very soul is by nature destined to outwardly reflect a system of governance in our physical reality. Former professor of anthropology at Macalester College, Jack Weatherford, wrote in his book titled The History of Money, quote, "The government will not redeem a dollar bill for anything other than another dollar bill. The dollar is simply fiat currency. The dollar rests on the power of the government and the faith of the people who use it. Faith that it will be able to buy something tomorrow. Faith that the U.S. government will continue to exist and to accept dollars in payment of taxes and pay them out in expenses. And faith that other people will continue to believe in it. Aside from that faith, nothing backs up the dollar." Where does this notion of faith arise from? The structure of modern civilization is dependent upon those who society perceives to hold power, manipulating the spiritual will of the majority. This is similar to how a magician or a priest within an organized religion works. The linguistics surrounding the monetary systems of the world are also acting to create a sense of faith for money, and by consequence, the state. Words such as trust, fiducial, and credit are used to foster the development of an endearing relationship between society and money. As Tracy Twyman states in her book titled Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge, every time a person spends $1 or accepts $1 as payment, they are confirming their belief in the dollar and using it to exercise their spiritual will. Taking an example of the US dollar bill, we can see the words, "In God we trust." This linguistic tool is used to connect the spiritual side of humanity with the most material aspects of our existence in this reality, thus manufacturing faith and worship of currency. Twyman goes on to state in her book that through the use of currency, it is implied that God himself has chosen to favor the United States, and by extension, the dollar. This is communicated by the message on the reverse of the Great Seal, Annuit Septis. He, God, favors our undertaking. The words E pluribus unum and the other 12 examples of one on the bill, along with the pyramid, remind us that our society is made up of various parts that are essentially united. Money is the great uniter, since it is the one thing that everyone in the country uses, and each dollar can continually be passed from person to person, potentially reaching millions. The spiderweb motif in the background of the bill's design illustrates how we are all connected through the web of commerce. Immortalized on the currency known as the Great British Pound are images of queens and kings, one of the most ancient ruses ever perpetrated upon society is the idea that a select few humans should rule over the majority due to divine mandate, or divine right of kingship. In other words, God has chosen a certain family to rule over society, and therefore everyone else should simply submit to this rule. This has been a well-understood dynamic used to seize power over the minds of the masses since at least the time of ancient Greek philosopher Plato. In Plato's Republic, a noble lie is a myth or a lie knowingly propagated by an elite to maintain social harmony. The inherent belief that society must be lied to in order to achieve a balance of harmony is one of the many reasons humanity has found itself in the crosshairs of a diminutive criminal cabal attempting to control our planet and every person who inhabits it. The concept of the noble lie, leading to a society that believes or accepts a ruler based on divine right, is reflected on the currency of the United Kingdom, the Great British Pound. This currency is declared legitimate through the state, represented by the monarchy pictured on the physical currency, which in turn is chosen by God. Again, this shows us the perfidious ways in which societal tools are constructed to tap into the spiritual side of the human being and hijack that facet of human nature for purposes of control. So, what does all of this mean exactly, in terms of how we lead our lives in the manner in which society is constructed? Perhaps we can apply more of aforementioned David Graeber's wisdom to this question. The ultimate, hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make, and could just as easily make differently.